Well, everyone, apparently our uneducated, plain Jane of the DIL will be singing for us. Come on, get on stage already, you ugly duckling. My MIL snickered. It was my SIL's wedding reception, and she ordered me to perform a solo. As usual, my MIL always finds a way to belittle me. Her audacity to humiliate me even on such a joyous occasion as my SIL's wedding is beyond my comprehension. What's taking so long? Hurry up. She's getting impatient, her voice hardening. Okay then, I will. Excuse me. I stood up from my seat and slowly headed towards the stage. My name is Erica, 33 years old. I live in a house with my 4-year-old daughter, Janice, and my husband, Paul, who's the same age as me. We're in our 8th year of marriage. I lost my parents when I was a child and was raised by my grandparents thereafter. However, I didn't want to be a burden to them anymore, so I dropped out of high school and got a job at a local factory. Paul and I went to the same high school, and we were reconnected at a reunion when we were 21. We hit it off and started dating. 3 years after Paul graduated from university, we got married. I've been supporting my husband, taking care of household chores, and raising our daughter while working part-time since our marriage. Mom, teach me how to sing. Recently, Janice has been asking me that quite a lot. Neither Paul nor I have any intention of forcing music onto her. I like music. I was the president of the choir club in high school. I still love singing and even take voice training lessons as a hobby. When both Paul and I are at home, I often sing to his music, and perhaps that's why Janice naturally developed an interest in music. I want to sing beautifully like you do, Mom. Seeing her say this with a smile, I can't help but smile back. When I told Paul about this, he reacted with joy, saying, "It's a blessing that she's enjoying music." However, we agreed that it would be better for a professional to teach her the basics of singing, and decided to take her to the voice trainer I often visit the next day. I hope that one day Janice and I can perform together with Paul's music. With these happy thoughts in mind, I fell asleep that day. 3 days later, when I returned home after shopping, my MIL called. She started belittling me ever since she found out I dropped out of high school when I got married to Paul. To be honest, she isn't my favorite person. She often showers me with insults like, "Can't you even do that? You're so slow. Your parents were no good, huh? That's why you dropped out of high school, isn't it?" I wonder if she's going to say something nasty again. With feelings of apprehension, I answered a call from my MIL. "Hello? Is Janice there right now?" "I'm sorry, she's at voice training right now. She's not home." After I said that, I realized I had let something slip, but it was too late. Why didn't you tell me before letting her attend such things? You really don't think things through. I'll teach her. My MIL, just like my husband, Paul, graduated from a prestigious music academy as valedictorian. She's quite the accomplished musician. She dotes on our daughter and treats her with so much love. However, maybe because she was a valedictorian, she tends to take a condescending tone when it comes to music and education. Paul and his sister were both rigorously taught about music by her in the past, to the point where they began to despise it. I'm certain it would be the same even with her granddaughter. It would be a problem if Janice, who had just started taking interest in music, begins to hate it because of the condescending way it's taught. Mother-in-law, I appreciate your offer, but I want Janice to have her freedom in this. She won't improve if she's just playing around. Make her quit right now. Even if you say that, it's really up to Janice. I can't force her to quit. I'm sure it would be much better if I taught her. With that, she abruptly ended the call. 3 months passed, and I had almost forgotten about the incident when my MIL decided to visit our home. It's been a while, hasn't it? Oh, how's Janice been doing? She was probably happy to see her granddaughter after such a long time. As soon as she stepped into our home, she immediately scooped Janice into her arms, barely greeting us. It just so happened that Janice had the day off from her voice training class and the whole family was at home. Granny! I've become good at singing! Janice exclaimed, boasting to her grandmother. Really? Could you sing something for me then? I was worried about what my MIL might say to Janice, so I intervened. How about we eat first before we hear her sing? It's lunchtime after all. Since it was noon, I tried to distract her by saying that, but don't interrupt when she's about to sing for me. My MIL dismissed my suggestion with a single comment. I'm sorry, Janice dear. Can you sing for me? My MIL asked. Hearing her say that, Janice began to sing. From the perspective of a MIL who graduated as the valedictorian of a music conservatory, my daughter's singing must sound rather clumsy. I had a sinking feeling inside me, worried that my daughter might get some snide remarks from her. However, my MIL applauded and praised my daughter, saying, "You did well. You've practiced a lot," far from making any sarcastic comments. Thank you, Grandma. My daughter seemed happy to be praised by her grandmother. I sighed in relief, thinking that even my strict MIL wouldn't make snide remarks to her granddaughter. I thought Mom might say something, so I was a little scared. Paul whispered to me with a look of relief on his face. Nothing particular happened after that, but as the evening came, I realized that Janice had fallen asleep. Excuse me, mother-in-law, since Janice fell asleep, I'm going to take her to her room. I picked up Janice and carried her to her bedroom. After I put my daughter to bed, I returned to the living room. As soon as I returned to the living room, my MIL said to me, "Didn't you think that Janice's singing today was terrible, Erica? It's a waste of money to let her go to a class that can only teach her to that level. I'll teach her myself." I guess that was what she thought after hearing my daughter's singing today. But as I said before, we can't decide that without hearing what Janice has to say. If you keep saying such soft things, that's all she will ever be able to sing. My MIL seemed to have no intention of listening to me whatever I might have to say. I asked Paul to say something, but when it came to music, he couldn't stand up to his mother and he fell silent. About 5 minutes of silence followed, and it was Paul who gave in and said, "All right, Mom, go ahead and teach Janice to sing for a while." Hearing those unbelievable words from Paul's mouth, my mind went blank. Is this some kind of joke? Won't they care how Janice feels? After all, she has been so happy to be interested in music. What if Janice hates music because she's taught so strictly by her grandmother? Wait a minute, isn't that a bit too selfish? I confronted Paul as anger welled up within me. What can we do? When it comes to music, she's much better than me, and it's a fact that I got better by being taught by her. I was so angry that I felt like waking up Janice right at the moment and leaving the house with her. So, I guess it means Janice is quitting the voice training class as I said, right? My MIL, with a triumphant look on her face, asked Paul and me. All right. But remember, this is not a music conservatory, so please absolutely do not do anything that Janice would dislike. I know that, you know. I'm not undereducated like you. I said what I had to say at least, knowing she'd never back off, and I let her go home for the day. That night, my husband apologized for his mother's behavior, but I did not even want to see his face. I ignored him and went to bed. Next morning, I told my daughter Janice, from today, instead of going to the voice training class, let's have Grandma teach you to sing here at home, all right? When she heard it, she looked very sad, but said nothing and just nodded. I'm sorry. Seeing her like that, all I could do was apologize. Then, come noon, my MAL arrived at our home. Janice, starting today, Grandma is going to teach you to sing even better. She said this to my daughter with a smile. No sooner had the lesson started than my MAL's teaching style became more and more strict within an hour. You're wrong. You're making the same mistake at the same place. Do it again. That's why I didn't want her to teach. I knew it would turn out like this. Mother-in-law, this isn't what we agreed to, is it? Could you be a bit gentler? What are you talking about? I am being gentle. Don't interfere. Why don't you quietly do some housework that you can hardly handle? 4 hours passed, and at last, my MAL's lesson ended. Well, see you tomorrow. Remember to practice what we did today. With that, she left, seemingly pleased with herself. If I'm going to get yelled at this much, I don't want to sing anymore. Seated in her chair, Janice said to me. I harbored an intense hatred for my mother-in-law, like I'd never felt before, for taking away what my daughter enjoyed and only caring about her own satisfaction. This cannot go on. I won't let my MIL have her way. Her singing lessons continued in the days that followed. However, after about a week, Janice told me, I don't want Grandma to teach me anymore. I don't want to sing. Given my MIL's way of teaching, I thought it couldn't be helped. You don't have to force yourself. If you want to quit, that's okay too. You don't want to go back to the voice training class? It was something she had started because she wanted to. And I, for my part, wanted her to continue, so I asked her that. If it's that class. It seemed that Janice hadn't come to hate singing itself. It appears that the harsh words from her grandmother and the lack of praise, even when she felt she did well, were making it unenjoyable for her. Why don't you go back to your voice training lessons and give it another shot? I asked Janice. As if she hadn't been upset moments before, she perked up and nodded enthusiastically. So, I'm sorry to say this to you, grandmother, but from tomorrow, Janice will be returning to her original voice training classes. The next day, I relayed Janice's feelings to her grandmother over the phone. How can she whine about giving up after just a week? Isn't it your fault for raising such a weak-minded child? Well, it might be. But even though you graduated top of your class from a prestigious music college, it seems that's the only way you know how to teach. Janice told me that she'd prefer at her voice training teacher. As I retorted, the grandmother was fussing and fuming over the phone, but I ignored her and hung up. Whether she was top of her class or not, it was quite satisfying that her own teaching method had led to her being disliked by her granddaughter, who preferred her voice training teacher. After that, the visits from the grandmother ceased. I've spoken to your mother and told her it was okay if she didn't come to teach anymore. Janice said she didn't want it anymore either. I also feel like I've done something unforgivable to Janice. Back in the day, my mother was very strict with me about music, so I couldn't say anything. But I thought she wouldn't be so harsh on her granddaughter. I'm really sorry. That night, when I relayed this to my husband, Paul, he seemed deeply regretful and apologized. I was so angry when Paul suggested quitting Janice's voice training class and having the grandmother teach her instead that I almost felt like punching him. But fortunately, Janice didn't come to hate music, so I decided to forgive him. 2 weeks later, Paul said, "My sister is getting married in a month and she asked us to perform." I had never performed at someone else's wedding before. What kind of performance is she expecting? I was planning to bring a few people from my band and do a small concert, but my sister really wants you and my mother to sing as well. I wasn't particularly thrilled about the idea, but hearing that the grandmother would also be performing, I reluctantly accepted Paul's suggestion.
So, does that mean I'll be singing with your mother? Well, yeah, that's how it seems.
Singing with my MIL, of all people. I wondered if it would be alright. But if I happen to sing better than her at this performance, I wonder what she'll say. I started practicing the very next day, but there was no sign of my MIL practicing at all.
Mother, aren't you going to practice?
I'm fine. I'm much better than you even without practicing. After all, practice is something that people like you, who are not very good, need to do. I tried asking because I was curious, but the only response from my MIL was sarcasm. I decided it was a waste of time to engage with her and focused on my own preparations. After we decided what song to perform, I also increased the frequency to get my voice training sessions. I was sick of being ridiculed by my MIL, and above all, I was anxious about singing in public after such a long time without proper training. And on the day of my Sael's wedding, the ceremony went smoothly, and the time for the entertainment had finally come. First, my husband, Paul, took the stage and began to play his music. As expected, given he plays regularly, he was confident and exuded an elegant aura. I was utterly mesmerized by Paul's performance.
I'm not feeling well today. Could you sing on your own?
Then, out of the blue, my MIL told me to sing solo.
What?
That's so sudden, it's not fair. Well, there's nothing we can do about it.
Or what?
Are you too embarrassed to sing in front of others because you're uneducated and ugly? She said this without a hint of remorse. Okay. I know it, she's doing this on purpose, I thought, and decided to retort. Being uneducated and ugly, I've practiced hard so I won't be embarrassed singing in front of others. I asked you several times if you needed to practice, but you showed no signs of doing so. Could it be that you're actually a terrible singer?
That's not true.
My MIL raised her voice in response to my question. The people around us began to stir, wondering what was going on. Sorry, it's nothing. I got up from my seat, apologized to those around me, and then pressed my MIL further. Graduating as valedictorian from the music college, you sure talk big about teaching others, huh? Are you running away because you're embarrassed to sing with me since I'm better? I whispered this in her ear.
What did you say? There's no way that's true. If I sing with a low-educated, ugly person like you, it would only throw me off. Didn't your parents teach you that? You and your parents are truly incompetent.
She disparaged me as being uneducated and ugly, and even insulted my parents in front of everyone. Embarrassed and angry, I wanted to leave right at the moment. But if I ran away now, it would just make her happy.
What are you doing just sitting there? Hurry up and go!
Okay then, I will. Excuse me. Just as Paul's performance ended, I took his place on stage. I was supposed to sing with my mother-in-law, but due to her not feeling well, I'll be singing solo. Instead of the song I was supposed to sing with her, I chose an opera song I used to sing a lot when I was competitive, an aria from The Marriage of Figaro. And so, I began to sing. At that moment, perhaps due to the vocal training I had done, my condition was excellent, and I was able to produce the most beautiful vibrato I'd ever achieved. It was amazing. The audience were mesmerized by my singing, saying things like, "Wow, her voice is incredible." And "Is she a professional?" When I finished singing my song without any hitches, the audience gave me a standing ovation, showering me with thunderous applause. Congrats on your wedding, sister-in-law. You know, I used to be the choir leader in high school. It's been a few years since I last sang in front of an audience, so I was a bit nervous. How did I do? Thanks so much for listening. After making this statement, I returned to my seat. My daughter, all starry-eyed, pleaded, Mom, your voice was so beautiful. Can you teach me next time? Witnessing this, my MIL, with her jealousy on full display, said in a humph, anyone can sing like that. Don't get ahead of yourself. She continued, never missing a chance to belittle my singing. Just as I thought the entertainment segment was over, my SAIL unexpectedly said, MIL, you should sing too. Words that I didn't expect came out from my SAIL. My MIL was taken aback and looked at her daughter in confusion, asking, me?
I've never heard you sing, Mom, and since you taught me so much about music when I was young.
I'd really love to hear you sing. My SAIL expressed this with pure honesty. The attendees chimed in, MIL, you should definitely sing. Words had gotten around that my MIL was the top graduate from a prestigious music school, and the crowd grew increasingly excited for her performance, creating an atmosphere where she felt she had to sing. Well, with all this, I guess you have to sing now, don't you? I did not hesitate to add so.
All right. If you insist,
she responded, heading to the stage. The moment my MIL took the stage, the energy in the room peaked. But as she began to sing,
wait, no way.
I might even be a better singer. Such murmurs could be heard throughout the crowd. She must have heard them as well. My MIL's voice did seem off, but even accounting for that, her singing was dreadful. She always criticized others for their singing, but her pitch was all over the place. Honestly, I felt I was still the better singer. The atmosphere grew awkward as her performance ended. Unlike when I sang, the venue was filled with cold atmosphere, and the applause was sparse. Everyone acted as if they had seen something they shouldn't have, as if her turn had never happened. Upon returning to our table, my MIL, her face flushed red, shouted at me, that's why I didn't want to sing.
If you had sung properly, my daughter wouldn't have asked me to do this.
She said it to me with such an Angie tone, but I didn't understand why. When my SAIL asked her mother to sing, it seemed to me that she genuinely wanted the wedding to be blessed by the voice of her mother who had been sternly teaching her about music since her childhood. Do you think so? To me, it seemed she genuinely wanted you to sing. I told my honest thought to my MIL.
No way! I'm sure she knew I'm bad at singing, and this is her way of embarrassing me.
I was utterly astonished at her response. She had always criticized others' music and performances, yet she herself didn't want to sing in public because she's bad at it. She never hesitates to complain about others' music, but she is like, I don't accept complaints although I'm a bad singer myself. Such self-centered attitude won't be accepted. My daughter, Janice, might have her newfound love for music crushed by her grandmother. I could no longer bear my MIL's attitude. So, a person who studied at a prestigious music school and criticizes others' music is just doing so because she can only sing this badly? But mother-in-law, isn't it great? You were able to sing alone without having to sing with a terrible singer like me. I responded to my MIL with a sarcastic tone.
How dare you say that? It's your fault that I had to embarrass myself.
It's not nice to say that in front of your daughter. I'm sure she's satisfied hearing her mother singing. As I spoke these words, my MIL fell silent. There was a stir amongst those who heard what I had said to my MIL, but other than that, the ceremony went on smoothly and ended without any problems. 2 days after the ceremony, my MIL stormed into our house.
I just can't let it go. I want you to apologize for what had happened.
I was surprised by her sudden visit, but I retorted, what exactly am I supposed to apologize for? I wasn't aware that your singing was that bad. Instead, I think you owe us an apology. I replied.
What do you mean? I have absolutely nothing to apologize for. It's your fault I was forced to sing that song I hated and embarrass myself.
No, not to me. To Janice. Because of you, Janice almost came to hate the music she had started to enjoy. Even though you graduated from a prestigious music school, why would you torment a child who has developed an interest in music just because things didn't go your way? Is that what you learned from your music school? I haven't received any musical training from you, yet I was able to sing at the reception and even received applause. How about you, Emil? Shall I give you some singing lessons? I'll teach you thoroughly. My Emil was speechless hearing what I said.
If you have nothing else to discuss, please leave. I won't tolerate you interfering with our daughter or my husband's music anymore.
Upon hearing this, my Emil left our home without another word, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a sense of satisfaction from being able to retaliate so fiercely in her of expertise, music. It was indeed worth continuing my voice training since my youth. Without the voice training, I might not have been able to receive such applause at my Asael's wedding reception. I wonder how my Emil, who has always boasted about graduating top of her class from a prestigious music school, felt being scolded this way by someone like me who only has a high school diploma and was just a choir member. To be honest, I felt a sense of poetic justice towards my Emil. I thought, serves her right, she shouldn't act so haughty anymore. It's been a month since that wedding ceremony of my Asael, and now my Emil occasionally visits our house, but she doesn't complain about my daughter's singing anymore. I actually didn't mind my Emil visiting since she did not say anything about music anymore. My daughter, Janice, who has improved a lot in her singing recently, is challenging a slightly difficult song given as an assignment in her class. Mom, this song is hard, but I'll try to sing it beautifully, she declared, practicing enthusiastically.
That's great, you do your best. You'll definitely do well.
Although I love singing, don't know much about the technical aspects, so I had no idea what was difficult about the song. But seeing my daughter working so hard, that's all I could say. On that day, my Emil, who happened to be visiting our house, observed the interaction between me and Janice and said,
Erica, this song is not something you can handle by just doing your best. Janice, listen well. You should do it like this.
It was incredibly kind and patient of her, which was unimaginable given how she used to be, to explain until Janice understood.
Oh, thank you, Grandma. It's easier to sing now,
Janice said as she listened intently to her grandmother's advice, working hard to master her assignment.
Erica, I used to look down on everyone doing music without graduating from a music college. But after meeting someone like you who can sing so beautifully without a music degree, I changed my mind. After all, we should enjoy music. Could you teach me to sing next time?
My mother-in-law said that, looking at Janice singing. I was surprised to hear such a thing all of a sudden, but I'm sure the sarcastic comment I made after my Asael's wedding had its effect. My lessons are tough, you know? I grinned as I replied to my mother-in-law.
Oh, I won't do anything horrible anymore. I feel sorry for Paul, too, although it's too late now. But if you're going to be tough, Erica, I'm prepared.
After hearing that from my Emil, I felt assured that she won't say anything about her music anymore. Although a lot had happened, the tension between my Emil and me eased off, and since then we've often gone to karaoke together, becoming close enough to sing together. I hope that one day, when Janice becomes even better at singing, the four of us, me, Paul, Janice, and my Emil, can have a fun jam session. When I looked at the sender's name on the letter delivered to my mailbox, It was written Violet.
Violet!
I blurted out without thinking. I hurried back to the living room. Why now? Why did I receive a letter from Violet? There's no use just thinking about it. I carefully opened the letter. There were several writing papers in it. Taking out only the writing paper, I continued reading while imagining a Violet's face. To Mom. It described the circumstances that had led Violet to her current situation. And at the end, these words were written. Please take revenge on my husband Andrew for me. That's my last request. Violet. As I finished reading, a single tear fell onto the table. Feeling a sense of powerless anger, I clenched the letter in my hand. At the same time, I resolved to take revenge in place of Violet. Andrew, you were only pretending to be a good person. It's my fault for not realizing it. So, I'll commend you for deceiving me until now. But that ends here. You made a fatal mistake. For taking away my dear daughter, I'll make you regret it until the end of your life. I bit my lip and reached for my mobile phone. My name is Scarlett. I work as an insurance agent at a major insurance company. After losing my husband early, I worked hard for my daughter Violet. It was often difficult, but thinking of Violet somehow gave me the strength to keep going. Then, about half a year ago, Violet told me she was getting married.
Violet's at that age now.
Violet had just turned 24. Now that I am 53 years old, I was feeling my age more and more. But there's no time for rest. Marriage is expensive, after all.
Violet's wedding is next month. No time to rest.
I wanted to help her for the wedding expenses and prepare a celebration. Maybe soon, I would have grandchildren. It was hard, but also incredibly joyful. But misfortunes come in times of happiness. That day, the phone call I received was just the thing.
Violet's.
The caller was a police officer. With a slightly strained voice, he informed me that Violet had passed away. Stunned, I let my mobile phone slip from my grasp. Her wedding was coming soon, why did Violet? Those thoughts raced through my mind. About a week later, I received an unexpected letter from Violet. I didn't know how Violet had died until I read this letter. Violet's letter began with a meeting her future husband, Andrew. I heard that Violet and Andrew met at the confectionery shop where she worked. Indeed, Violet loved making sweets. Probably because her best friend's family owned a confectionery shop. She got interested after enjoying their delicious treats and started making her own. Putting that aside, Violet went to a local culinary school after high school to study confectionery formally. She seriously learned confectionery skills there, and she got a job at a confectionery chain with several stores in the state. Nice to meet you. I'm Andrew, I'll train you. I've got a bit more experience, but feel free to talk to me. Andrew, a bit older, became Violet's supervisor when she started her job. Turns out, Andrew was the son of the president of the confectionery company that owned the shop where Violet worked. Incidentally, whenever Violet was scolded by other pastry chefs, Andrew quickly defended her.
She's new, there's no need to be so harsh.
Of course, everyone knew Andrew was the president's son. So, when he said something like that, no one could oppose him. On the other hand, Violet found Andrew, who defended her, to be very reliable. Soon, a trust developed between them, and it was only a matter of time before it turned into romantic feelings. Eventually, about a year after she started working, Andrew confessed his feelings to Violet. That's how they started dating and gradually deepened their relationship. But Violet wasn't just focused on romance. She diligently worked as a pastry chef. During work, she followed the instructions of Andrew and her superiors, and after hours, she practiced to improve her skills. Sometimes Andrew would join her for practice. It seemed those moments were important in strengthening their bond. By the time they started dating, Violet had become a competent pastry chef. But all of this was part of Andrew's scheme. Violet only realized this after they started dating. Time passed, and a few months ago, Andrew approached Violet with a proposal. Violet, a sweets exhibition will be held in 3 months, right? I need to discuss something about that.
The sweets exhibition? The one at the department store downtown? I heard popular confectionaries will be selling their treats there.
Yes, that one. Apparently, there's been a vacancy, and suddenly our shop is participating. Andrew spoke with a hint of confusion. Violet tilted her head. Our shop is popular, right? Is there any problem? We have to come up with a new dessert. We also need to create next season's new items. I see. Violet understood. Confectionery shops often introduce new items each season. For instance, treats for events like Valentine's Day or Christmas are needed. We have our wedding next month. I can't take on more. That's why I wanted to hear your ideas, Violet. Andrew clasped his hands together, making a pleading gesture. Violet sighed softly. Can't be helped. I'll bring my recipe notebook tomorrow. That would be a great help.
Make sure you let everyone know it is my idea.
That's all they talked about at that time. But the next day, an incident occurred. After work, Violet took her recipe notebook and headed to the kitchen. Sorry to keep you waiting. She entered the kitchen. But Andrew was nowhere to be seen. Maybe he's still working? Being the company heir must be busy. Thinking this, Violet decided to wait for Andrew. While looking through her recipe notebook, she suddenly felt someone's presence behind her. Andrew? Were you working? Violet turned around. But Andrew wasn't there. Oh? Violet? What are you doing here? Ah, Mr. Carter. It was Mr. Carter. He worked for the confectionery company but wasn't a pastry chef. He was more of an office worker, handling tasks like accounting. It seemed he came to lock up. Do you still have something to do here? Yes. I'm here to help Andrew with his work. Andrews. Oh, I see. Mr. Carter laughed unpleasantly. Was he thinking something bad? Sensing this, Violet's expression soured. Suddenly, Mr. Carter shouted.
Even if you're dating the boss's son, I can't overlook such behavior from an employee. I'm not. I was just... Quiet. Don't make excuses.
Mr. Carter advanced towards her. In a reflex, Violet threw him her recipe notebook.
Ah.
Mr. Carter covered his face and crouched down. Andrew came there.
What's going on? I heard a loud noise, Violet. Are you okay? What happened?
Andrew. It's just... Violet explained everything to Andrew. But, in reality, nothing had happened. Mr. Carter had just found that Violet and Andrew were meeting up. He jumped to unsavory conclusions on his own. Violet, upset by such bizarre suspicions, wore an annoyed expression. This displeased Mr. Carter, who attempted to reprimand her. So you threw Mr. Carter the recipe notebook, and he ended up like this. Yes, I'm sorry. Violet apologized. Meanwhile, Andrew checked on Mr. Carter. The area hit by the notebook was turning red. But luckily, there were no serious injuries.
I'll report this to the president. You'll be fired immediately.
That's not fair.
Shut up. Brace yourself.
Mr. Carter shouted angrily. Then Mr. Carter hurried out of the kitchen. What should I do, Andrew? It's okay. I'll handle it. But if it gets reported to your father, our relationship might be opposed. Violet was most afraid of that.
Don't worry. I'll always protect you. Andrew, leave it to me.
Later, this incident reached the president's ears. But Violet faced no punishment. It was because Andrew had intervened.
Andrew protected me.
Violet thought so. Their relationship seemed to grow even stronger. But all of this was also part of Andrew's scheme. A few days later, Violet would come to realize the whole truth. After the kitchen argument, Andrew said something to Violet. "I feel bad asking this, Violet, but can you keep quiet about providing the idea?" "Why?" "You know, because of the matter of Mr. Carter." On the day of the incident, Andrew was alone in the kitchen. While Andrew was working on a new creation, Mr. Carter came in. There was an accident during Andrew's work, and a cooking utensil hit Mr. Carter's face. Andrew wanted to make it seem like that's what had happened. Reluctantly, Violet agreed. "Sorry, Violet. It's actually your recipe. I'll return the notebook later." "It's okay. You coordinated everything to protect me." "Well, yeah. If that's the story we're going with," Mr. Carter agreed to it. Andrew spoke of the effort it took to align their testimonies. Violet felt deeply grateful to Andrew for his efforts on her behalf. However, a few days later, Violet, who had stayed late to clean up, was about to leave after changing. Passing by the office, she heard Andrew's voice. "Andrew's still here. I should say hello." But as she was about to enter, she froze at Andrew's words. "And that's how it went. Thanks to you, Mr. Carter." "Mr. Carter, what does that mean?" Pondering, Violet listened closely to Andrew's voice. Soon, she heard Andrew's laughter. Then, his true feelings came out. "Violet's just a convenient tool. Now that I've got her recipes, I don't need her anymore." Violet was stunned. Was I deceived? She covered her mouth, trying hard not to make a sound. But she couldn't stop the tears from flowing. That recipe is really good. It's a waste to let that woman keep it. From there, she could only listen to the truth she didn't want to hear, in Andrew's gleeful voice. He had ordered other pastry chefs to scold Violet. Then he would intervene, earning Violet's trust. He also set up the situation with Mr. Carter, making Violet feel indebted and trapped. And in the confusion of that moment, he was glad to have stolen Violet's recipes. Andrew said that. And then he added, "If she tries to escape, I'll just confront her with a shocking truth." Andrew smiled unpleasantly. "What does he mean?" Violet wondered, as Andrew answered himself. It's about fraud. She's already complicit in it without knowing." Andrew sneered. At that moment, Violet's mobile phone fell from her pocket. It made a sound as it hit the floor, and Andrew noticed the phone. Violet could see this through the gap in the door. "I have to get away," she thought, but her legs wouldn't move. Andrew quickly spotted Violet. He looked at her with a menacing expression. "Were you listening?" Well, it doesn't matter. If you try to run, I'll just accuse you." Andrew's lips curled into a smirk. Violet felt an intense fear of that smile. After that, Violet, unable to escape from Andrew, led a life dictated by him. She was also boldly made to help with the fraud he mentioned. However, Violet, being inherently honest and kind, couldn't endure such a life. Eventually, about a month later, Violet was found on the first floor of her apartment. There were no witnesses, but a passerby had heard a loud noise. When they checked, they found Violet lying below her room. According to the police, it's likely Violet did it herself. However, Andrew's laptop was found nearby. Perhaps Violet intended to expose Andrew's fraud by doing so. But the police examined the laptop and found no noteworthy data. I had suspected Andrew, who lived with her, from the moment I heard of the incident. However, on that day, Andrew was not at home. He was out of state for work. So, Andrew couldn't be the culprit. I had no choice but to accept that. Afterward, along with Andrew and his parents, we completed Violet's funeral. Even after everything ended, I remained in a daze. I couldn't bring myself to do anything. If only my husband were here, maybe he could have helped ease the loneliness. Violet, why? That was all I could mutter. I felt powerless. For several days, I cried, thinking that. Then, a week passed after Violet's death. I had to accept the reality of losing Violet. Just as I was beginning to come to terms with it, a letter arrived. When I looked at the sender's name on the letter delivered to my mailbox, it was written Violet.
Violet!
I blurted out without thinking. I hurried back to the living room. Why now? Why did I receive a letter from Violet? There's no use just thinking about it. I carefully opened the letter. There were several writing papers in it. Taking out only the writing paper, I continued reading while imagining a Violet's face. To Mom. It detailed the circumstances that had led Violet to her situation. The truth Violet penned ignited anger in me. It meticulously described how she was deceived by Andrew, her recipes stolen and forced into fraud. And finally, there was this line written in the letter.
Please take revenge on Andrew for me. That's my last request, Violet.
As I finished reading, a single tear fell onto the table. I clenched the letter, overwhelmed by a sense of powerless anger. At the same time, I resolved to take revenge on behalf of Violet. Andrew, you were only pretending to be a good person. It's my fault for not realizing it. So, I'll commend you for deceiving me until now. But that ends here. You made a fatal mistake. For taking away my dear daughter, I'll make you regret it until the end of your life. I bit my lip and reached for my mobile phone. I quickly arranged for a taxi. Violet's letter had an address written on it. There must be something important there. Violet. I should go here, right? Clutching the letter, I jumped into the taxi. Heading to the address. It was a local bank. According to Violet's letter, there seems to be something in a safe deposit box. I showed my ID to the staff and explained the situation. I also showed the bank card and key for the safe deposit box. The staff then led me to the safe deposit box. Violet had apparently told them I would be coming. I opened the box in the room I was led to. Inside were documents and a notebook. This is... I quietly read on. The documents were written by Violet. They detailed the methods and content of the fraud, and the people involved in it. The notebook was Violet's recipe notebook, containing recipes of products sold at Andrew's shop.
Violet, you did all this.
Even just from this, I could tell Violet's meticulous nature. Tears flowed as I thought of Violet. But I couldn't just sit and mourn. I quickly put the documents and notebook into my bag. Then, I noticed some jewelry. It was a heart-shaped pendant with a yellow sticky note attached. Treating it so carelessly, you wouldn't do that, Violet. Muttering, I carefully picked up the pendant. Then I saw the words on the sticky note. Instantly, I was shocked and disturbed. I clutched the pendant tightly.
Violet, I'll definitely take revenge. Just wait.
With renewed determination, I left the bank. I headed straight to a local confectionery shop. It was the family shop of Wendy, Violet's close friend. Wendy, whom I had seen at Violet's funeral, was at the shop front. Hello, Wendy. Violet's mom? About the other day. Wendy hugged me, and I hugged her back. There's something I want to talk about. Do you have a moment? Wendy looked towards the back. A man, presumably Wendy's father, nodded. Then, please come this way. Wendy led me to the back of the shop. The back was a residence. I was taken to the living room. As Wendy served coffee, I spoke abruptly. Actually, I received a letter from Violet.
From Violet?
Wendy was surprised and confused. Read it first. We'll talk after that. I handed Violet's letter to Wendy. Wendy read it silently, with great concentration. Eventually, she, like me, was in tears. Then, she handed the letter back to me. Thank you. I'll give this back to you first. So, what do you think?
We can't forgive him. I won't.
Wendy clenched her fist. I felt relieved knowing Wendy shared my feelings. Will you help me then? Yes. But what should I do? You're Violet's best friend, so you know about this, right? I showed her Violet's recipe notebook from the safe deposit box. Wendy immediately affirmed. This was in the safe deposit box, but the moment I saw the contents of the box, it was as if someone had whispered an idea to me. I decided to use it as part of my plan for revenge against Andrew, as Violet's wish. I explained the plan to Wendy. Then, I entrusted Violet's recipe notebook to her. Can you do this for me? For Violet's sake, yes. Wendy strongly agreed. That's the first step prepared. I felt a bit relieved. Then I quietly stood up and shook hands with Wendy. Thank you, I'm counting on you. Saying this, I left Wendy's place. I headed to another location. It was a branch of the confectionery shop where Violet used to work. The shop was quite far from the one where Violet had worked. I spent a lot of time getting there. Upon entering, I asked a woman who looked like a part-time employee. Excuse me, is Mr. Carter here? The woman looked puzzled. Then I added, my daughter worked at another shop and was helped by Mr. Carter. I showed her the employee card given to me by Andrew after Violet's funeral. The woman immediately smiled. Soon Mr. Carter came out from the back. Seeing my face, he turned pale. He recognized me as Violet's mother from the funeral. Can we talk outside for a bit? If you refuse, you know what will happen, right? I smiled at him, deliberately gentle. Thanks to that, Mr. Carter agreed readily. We moved to a nearby park, and Mr. Carter immediately apologized.
I'm so sorry. I was threatened too.
What are you talking about?
I mean,
Mr. Carter, without being asked, started confessing everything he had done. He was only approached by Andrew under threat, and he had no choice but to call out Violet. He wasn't involved in anything else. It was all Andrew who dragged him into evil. He never thought Violet would take her own life. Mr. Carter apologized to me, crying.
apologies won't change anything. Violet will never come back.
I couldn't help but raise my voice. Mr. Carter closed his mouth, frightened. Realizing I said too much, I took a deep breath. Then, with a stern look, I asked Mr. Carter, if you're willing to apologize, will you do me a favor? Yes.
Then, please testify about this incident. And don't say anything to Andrew. Understood?
Once confirmed, Mr. Carter agreed, though fearfully. Afterward, I had Mr. Carter testify everything. I recorded all of it and even let him write and sign a statement of his testimony. That's the second step done. Now, Wendy, I'm counting on you. I muttered softly, watching Mr. Carter's dejected figure return to the store. After a while, I received an invitation from Andrew.
A sweets exhibition.
It was the invitation to the very sweets exhibition. Andrew didn't know I was aware of the truth. So, the invitation boldly included these words. We'll be showcasing sweets Violet praised highly. Please come for Violet's sake. I almost tore it up in anger. But the preparations would all be for nothing by doing so. I managed to restrain myself and waited for the day of the sweets exhibition. Day after day. I watched the calendar. Finally, the first day of the sweets exhibition arrived. I went to the venue with Violet's employee card on my chest. Upon entering, Andrew greeted me. He approached with a dubious smile, offering a handshake. Scarlett, I'm glad you could make it. Yes. Violet was looking forward to it, wasn't she? Yes. I've prepared my masterpiece for this occasion. He guided me to a display filled with magnificent cakes and chocolates. I asked Andrew with a forced smile. Which ones did you make? This time, I made chocolates. Valentine's Day is coming up, after all. Andrew pointed to chocolates in the center of the display. Stylishly decorated chocolates. But these were made from Violet's recipes. Thinking that made me seethe with anger. Then, a woman's voice came from behind. May I interview you? I turned to see a woman holding a file. apparently a magazine journalist, with a camera. Andrew and the woman talked. After a while, the woman tilted her head, puzzled. "Excuse me, are you sure you made these?" Andrew was taken aback by her words. Then he retorted with a sneer.
Of course I did. What are you talking about? But I saw similar ones at another store. What? What do you mean?
Andrew raised his voice. Several guests in the venue turned to look. The woman continued.
The explanation and design are very similar. That's impossible. Which store is that?
Andrew's voice grew louder. The woman, though scared, pointed to a distant location. Andrew rushed off. And I quickly followed. Soon, we arrived in front of a certain store. There, Wendy was standing by the storefront. Wendy nodded slightly when she saw me. Then she addressed Andrew. "Long time no see."
It's you. You stole our shop's recipes.
Stole? That's not true. Wendy smiled. Meanwhile, Andrew, red-faced, raised his voice.
Then what's this? It's almost identical to our product.
He pointed to chocolates lined up. Almost identical to those in his shop. Then Andrew pointed to a sign at the storefront and shouted.
And this? Doesn't melt easily even in warm places. What's this about?
It's our newly developed product.
Don't joke with me. This is exactly the same as the unique method I devised.
Andrew's voice stirred up murmurs among the bystanders. But Wendy, undisturbed, retorted. That's just a coincidence. But if it's the same, please stop using it at your shop. What did you say?
This is made using a patented method developed by my father years ago. Patented method?
Andrew's face turned pale. Actually, Violet's recipe used that patented method. But Violet had no intention of infringing the patent. It is because she planned to sell it with Wendy.
This is a recipe Violet came up with for our future shop together. That's... You stole the recipe from Violet.
Wendy's words silenced Andrew. Clearly losing his composure, Andrew was questioned by the earlier woman.
What about it? Did you steal the recipe? No, Violet was our employee, Anne.
Andrew started making inconsistent excuses. But nobody believed him. Eventually, Andrew was unable to withstand the surrounding gazes, and he fled the scene. I quickly followed Andrew. The woman from earlier also followed. Returning to his shop space, Andrew began hurriedly packing up. Apparently, he intended to act as if nothing had happened. But I wouldn't allow it. I approached Andrew.
Wait! We're not done talking. So, Violet provided the recipe. What's your complaint? I have one. What you did wasn't just that, was it? Just that, what do you mean?
Sweat beaded on Andrew's forehead. Knowing this was a critical moment, I raised my voice.
Your shop has been evading taxes. Ah.
Andrew instinctively covered his mouth. The surrounding gazes intensified on him. I continued, calmly detailing Andrew's actions.
First, you kept a separate record of pre-ordered products, not accounting for them in sales. I don't know what you're talking about. Moreover, you falsified inventory records for raw materials. That's how you evaded taxes, right? I don't know anything about that.
Andrew attempted to deny loudly. I then produced a copy of the documentation Violet had compiled.
Violet detailed the method here. Look at this.
I scattered the documents on the spot. Several people rushed to pick them up. They began comparing and discussing among themselves. Soon, the journalist questioned Andrew.
What about this? According to these documents, her story seems true.
Andrew was silent in response to the journalist's question. Soon, similar voices arose from the audience.
I work in accounting, and this is clearly fraud. It's definitely tax evasion.
Faced with these accusations, Andrew's patience finally snapped,
Shut up! None of this concerns you. I didn't do anything. This can't be evidence.
Andrew's outburst silenced the crowd. In the midst of this, I took out my mobile phone. Then, I played a certain audio recording. Listen up. Mark the inventory as less.
But that would mean... Don't argue with me. You can't escape this now.
The voices of Violet and Andrew echoed in the venue. People from afar also started to gather closer. The recording continued. What about today's pre-order receipts? I destroyed them. They were cash payments, convenient for fudging the sales. That's again?
Shut up. If we paid taxes properly, we'd never make any money.
The recording ended with those words from Andrew. I glanced and saw Andrew's face had turned ashen.
This recording was in a pendant Violet had. It was an IC recorder. That heart-shaped one?
Yes.
It was an IC recorder. Violet left it as irrefutable evidence.
Andrew crumbled. Then, a security guard arrived with a police officer. The officer looked at Andrew and me, then asked Andrew, who was almost collapsing.
I've heard quite a bit. Is it true that you were evading taxes? No. That is... We'll ask you more thoroughly at the police station. For now, would you please come with us?
The officer spoke calmly to Andrew. But his eyes were not kind. I handed the officer Mr. Carter's testimony. Then I told him about Violet's suicide. I understand. We'll investigate that as well, the officer said, casting a stern glance at Andrew. But Andrew had no strength left to argue. Afterward, Andrew was arrested on charges of tax evasion and other offenses. Violet's case was also thoroughly investigated. However, it wasn't that Andrew directly caused Violet's death. In the end, he was only charged with assault for Violet's case. Nevertheless, the arrest had a significant impact. In just a few months, Andrew's father's confectionery company was driven into bankruptcy. Naturally, all the operating stores were closed. The shop where Violet worked became a rented space. I don't know what will happen to Andrew's sentencing, but I hope he reflects on his actions. After Andrew was taken away by the police, Wendy distributed the chocolates to the people at the venue. These chocolates were designed by my best friend. While handing them out, I wished Violet could have seen this. Especially the customers smiling as they tasted the chocolates. Violet would have loved to see that. Tears welled up in my eyes. But I had no time to cry. Because the sale of those chocolates had been decided. We want to name the product Violet. Because it's a light violet color, and most importantly, it was Violet's idea. Wendy spoke with a smile. Then she added, "Would you write the product tag for us? We want to display it with Violet's photo at the store." So, for the first time in my life, I started working on creating a store display tag. I hope Violet would like it. Speaking to Violet's smiling photo, I reached for a light purple colored pencil.